Hello everyone. So welcome to our first topic for this subject, governance, ethics, risk management, and internal control. So our first topic will be corporate governance. So I apologize if medyo na late, no? So please note that during the discussion, so I will be speaking in English and Bisaya. So para po dili kayo maboard or para po di po ta malangay yung edit ani nga video. So in this video, our objective will be as follows. So first, we will revisit the definition of corporation, its characteristics and structure. So I think you have taken up corporation in your last business law nga mga subjects. Di lang ko sure if asa ato nga business law. And then, of course, you will be able to define corporate governance, discuss the fundamental objectives of corporate governance, discern what good governance promote, and lastly, list the benefits of good governance. So let's have a quick review of the definition of corporation. So as stated by the revised Corporation Code last 2019, so they define corporation as an artificial being created by operation of law, having the right of succession and the powers, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law or incident to its existence. So, so based on that definition, so we can derive four characteristics or attributes of a corporation. So first, artificial being. Second, created by operation of law. Third, enjoys the right of succession. And fourth, it has the powers, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law or incident to its existence. So let's discuss this one by one. So first, a corporation is considered as an artificial being. So what do you mean by artificial being? So in the eyes of the law, a corporation has a legal personality, separate and distinct from its shareholders. So meaning, si shareholder, naa siya'y iyang personality, si corporation pod, napod siya'y separate nga personality. Pero si shareholder, in the eyes of the law, considered siya as natural person. Si corporation, considered siya as artificial or judicial being. So again, a corporation is considered as a person in the eyes of the law. So since considered man siya as a person, under its own corporate name, it may take, hold, and dispose property under its corporate capacity. So meaning, a corporation can acquire assets like, for example, land, inventory, or building, and name that building under its corporate name. And moreover, a corporation may enter into contract, can sue, and can be sued to court. So, pwede mo enter into contract si corporation. Pwede siya mukaso, then pwede po siya makasuhan. A corporation can also be convicted on criminal offense, like for example, fraud. So, if a corporation committed such act, so pwede siya kasuhan. So, that's for the first characteristic. Second is created by operation of law. So which means that it will come into existence through a charter or a grant from the state. So here in the Philippines, a corporation is created upon issuance of the Certificate of Incorporation issued by the SEC or Securities and Exchange Commission. So if you still remember, di ba, sa partnership, a partnership is created from the moment nga naanay meeting of minds si partner A and partner B. So regardless if oral or written, as long as there is mutual agreement between the parties, automatically the partnership is created. pero dili nga na sa corporation. So bisan pag nagka-agree na ang mga shareholders or ang mga incorporators to create a corporation, so wala pa na-create that time si corporation. Again, a corporation is created upon issuance of the certificate by the SEC. Third, uh, the corporation enjoys the right of succession. So what do you mean by right of succession? So a corporation can continue to exist even in death, incapacity, or insolvency of any stockholder or member. The corporation will not dissolve even when there are transfer of ownership. So sa partnership, if one partner dies or withdraws from the partnership, it will dissolve the partnership, right? Kay maotro man ang profit or loss ratio or maotro man ang ratio sa capital. So they need to dissolve the partnership. Then ang uban ng gani ilahang i-rename ang partnership kay nanay nawala. However, sa corporation, bisan pa og naay new shareholder or naay mawala ang shareholder or naay shareholder nga ang iyang shares iyang gi-transfer to another shareholders, it will not affect the corporation. It will not dissolve the corporation. So, mo nang meaning sa right of succession. Lastly, it has the powers, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law or incident to its existence, which means that the corporation is authorized to do activities within the purpose of its creation. It has its own traits, and it operates based on what has been expressly provided in the charter, including those that are considered incident to its existence as a corporation. Kaya if mag-create mo og corporation, so you need to draft a document called Articles of Incorporation. So sa partnership, ang tawag sa document is Articles of Co-Partnership. Sa corporation pod, all agreements of the shareholders is written in the Articles of Incorporation. So tanan naka-agreement sa partners nakabutang dito Nakabutang po dito ang name sa corporation, ang ilang purpose nganong nagtukod sila corporation. Then, kung unsa lay purpose nakabutang dito, dapat mo po tilahang sundon once mag-start na sila og operate. So, what do you mean by incident to its existence? So, for example, a fishing company need not ask if they could put up a storage facility for this purpose because implied na nga if magtukod ka og fishing company, dapat na kay storage storage or warehouse. So no need na nga expressly state sa ilahang articles of incorporation. So those are the four characteristics or attributes of the corporation. So again, na-derive lang ni sa previous slide sa katong definition sa corporation. So at this point, so let us review the corporate structure. But before we proceed to the corporation, so let us start from the sole proprietor first. So when we say sole proprietor, pasabot, there is only one owner called the proprietor. So for owners or proprietor who had just started their business, so they themselves will be the one who will manage their day-to-day operations. So si owner ang mo palit sa iyang mga supplies, siya ang mamaligya, siya ang mag-record, siya ang mag-manage tanan. But eventually, as the business progresses, and for example, mahimo siyang corporation, there will be a number of investors now that owns the company. So let's say we have 100, if not thousands of shareholders. So it's unlikely that they will manage the corporate activities, right? So, di ba, pag ma-incorporate na siya, of course, di na siya ang owner. Daghan na sila yung owners. So, gitawagon sila og shareholders. So, the owners of the corporation, dili pasabot nga owner sila, sila tanan ang mumanage sa corporation. Kay imagine unsa sila kadaghan kung dili thousand, hundreds na sa kabuok. So, what do these owners do? So, these shareholders will elect or vote from themselves what we called board of directors. So, requirement sa law na dapat to be a board of director, you must at least kanang own one share of the corporation. So, kaning mga directors, gikan nga po ni siya sa shareholders. So, to represent themselves, so they will vote. So, depende na sa ilahang voting mechanism sa pag-vote sa directors. So, this board of directors will represent the shareholders, and will act as a governing body of the corporation. So the board of directors will be headed by the chairman, who is the most influential person in the corporation. So one of the duties of the board is establishing the company's broad goals and objectives and the means of achieving these objectives. So sila ang murag na ay oversight function sa corporation. But the problem now is that uh, some, if not most, of the board of directors are not so familiar in handling the activities of the corporation. Nga naman, especially pag family-owned corporation, as long as nakakay cash to acquire stocks, so pwede na ka ma-shareholders. What if ma-elect siya as board? So, since naman siya kwarta, bisag wala ka siya knowledge as to managing the corporation, so maglisod sila og operate. So, what do they do to ensure the achievement of their objectives? So, this board of directors will hire experts, or what we call now the management. So, like the CEO, the COO, and the CFO, and etc. So this management will be in charge to the day-to-day activities of the corporation. So, for example, si COO or Chief Operating Officer is in charge in the operations. Si CFO or Chief Financial Officer is in charge siya sa finance and accounting matters. And the overall responsible of the company is the CEO or the Chief Executive Officer, or ang ubang tawag is President. So they must ensure that the activities of the company or the operation is in line with the goals and objectives set by the board. Hence, they have periodic reports to be submitted to the board and to the shareholders. So again, the shareholders will vote for directors, then directors will hire management. So to be in charge with the day-to-day activities of the corporation. So at the end of the day, this management will report the result of the operation to the board, and the board of course will relay the information to the shareholders. Ideally, if the board of directors will do their duties and responsibilities properly, like for example, establishing goals and objectives, na ay mga proper committees within the board, and monitoring the performance of the management. And sa side po sa management, like uh, implementation of controls, performance measures, and reporting to the board. So everything will work well. So especially if the board and the management will work together, ideally, because in reality, Some of the board of directors and some of the management, especially katong sa top management, the CEO, the CFO, so some of them will um, do actions that is not in the interest of the corporation or the company. So like for example, sa katong gipawatch na ko nga video about Enron, one of the biggest accounting scandal or fraud in the history. So 'di ba sa video na ibawan ninyo what happened. So what causes the fraud? And then sa diri nga video, I will discuss or we will discuss what are the consequences after those fraud or fraudulent acts happen. So first is 4,500 employees lost their jobs. So sila gid ang pinaka-affected. So imagine 4,000 ka families ang affected because their mother or father or parents nawad anong trabaho. So unsa may effect pag walay trabaho ang ilahang parents, of course wala na pangkaso sa ilahang daily needs. Another is investors lost some $60 billion within a few days. For many it meant losing their old age security. So, di ba, ang purpose na to invest is to earn more, and we expect that our investment will accumulate. So, meaning modako siya in the future. So, sa ilang makuha sa future if na bankrupt naman si Enron. Another is the pension fund for the company employees was obliterated. So meaning wala na gyud makuha or ma-recover ang mga employees. So unsa na lang tong hapit na mo retire, like almost 60 years old na, na-expect na siya nga once retired na siya makadawat na siya og monthly nga pension. So asa naman iyang pension if na bankrupt na si Enron? Right, di ba? Luoy taon kaayo nga pila siya ka years nag-work sa company, and then at the end of the day wala siya makuha as pension. Another is citizens' trust in the American economic system was destroyed. Of course, kinsa may mosalig pa sa economic system sa company, kinsa man nga investor or foreign investor ang mo-invest sa US if naday nga na nga nahitabo sa Enron. Another is losses on the financial market amounted to the worst stock value loss in peaceful times. So, grabe gid ang pagka-down sa market ato. So, barato kayo ang stock price sa Enron o sa iyang mga affiliated nga mga company. Banks were suspected of collusion. So, some stakeholders sa banks loses their trust sa ilaha kay they are suspected nga na mga collusion between the bank and Enron. Another is the auditing firm Arthur Andersen lost its accreditation kay 'di ba si Arthur Andersen ang auditor sa Enron. So though nakita niya ang mga fraud committed by the directors or officers of Enron, so they did not disclose it in their reports. 'Di ba as auditor dapat kung unsa may nakita nimo sa financial statement, so kung sakto or dili dapat i-report ko nimo what really is the kanang correct financial statement. However, wala nila ila pong gi hide ang mga fraudulent acts committed by the top management of Enron. So because of that, so daghan kay na dili lang ni mao ang nadre sa list, so daghan pa. So bisag katong mga uban companies. So as a result, the rules for company financial reporting were drastically sharpened after the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was established. So in response to the consequences of the Enron scandal and other scandals like for example WorldCom and etc. So the government of America signed this Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So we will have another discussion for this Sarbanes-Oxley. So corporate governance definition. So one of the concept under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was the proper corporate governance. So mo nilang answer in response sa mga fraud nga nahitabo. So as a result, mura siya kuan um, wake up call sa government sa US nga they really need to monitor and establish policies for corporations para ma-protect pod kay di ba dili lang man ang mga employees ang affected sa nahitabo sa Enron. So if wala na mo invest sa US, of course, mugamay pod ang income sa US. So everyone actually is affected. Okay, of course, dako kay nga corporation sa Enron. So that's why under sa Sarbanes-Oxley Act, one of the policies nga ilang i-require for companies or organization is to establish a proper and adequate corporate governance. So before we proceed, so we have various definitions of corporate governance here. So I think natin mga four definitions. So globally, there are a lot of definitions of corporate governance, but for this discussion, so I selected, I think, mga four definitions. So for our first definition, so from international standards for professional practice of internal auditing, so simply from IIA or Institute of Internal Auditors. So sa standards sa IIA, they define governance as the combination of processes and structures implemented by the board to inform, direct, manage, and monitor the activities of the organization towards the achievement of its objectives. So that's from the IAA. We also have from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development or OECD. So this one is the most adapted definition of corporate governance globally. So they defined governance as a set of relationships between the company's management. So relationship between the management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. So dili lang within the company but of course including those other persons or organizations affected by the actions of the company. So corporate governance provides the structure through which the objectives of the company are set and the means of attaining those objectives and monitoring performance are determined. So mas kompleto iyang definition. That's why nag-adapt ani nga definition. Another is another definition we have is from the Australian Securities Exchange Corporate Governance Council. So they define governance as the system by which the companies are directed and managed. It influences how the objectives of the companies are set and achieved, how risk is monitored and assessed, and how performance is optimized. So that's from the Australian Securities Exchange Corporate Governance Council. And here in the Philippines, so we also have our own definition of corporate governance. So, in its revised Code of Corporate Governance, year 2009, so they defined governance as the framework of rules, systems, and processes in the corporation that governs the performance by the board of directors and management of their respective duties and responsibilities to the stockholders. However, in response to the revised Corporation Code last 2019 and to keep abreast with the recent developments in corporate governance best practices, so they made another definition of corporate governance through its SEC Memo Circular Number 24, Series of 2019, in its Code of Corporate Governance for publicly listed companies and registered issuers. So, last year manggod, di ba, gi-revise ang corporation code. So that's why ila pong gi-revise ang ilahang definition sa governance. So they define governance as the system of stewardship and control to guide organizations in fulfilling their long-term economic, moral, legal, and social obligations toward their stakeholders. Okay, so based on those definitions of governance, so here are the keywords or mga words na mention a lot of times. So first, governance is a system or a process. Second, effect board or governance is a system affected by the board. So ang overall responsibility gid sa governance is the board or the board of directors. Another keyword is the objectives. So meaning governance is the process by which the board set their objectives and the means of achieving these objectives. And of course, ang last is the stakeholders. So, it is different from shareholder ha. Ang shareholder katong owner sa stock or shares. Ang stakeholders mas broad siya. Stakeholders includes all those persons and organizations affected by the actions of the organization, like creditors, government, customers, and etc. So they must ensure that, or the board must ensure that they must implement a process or system that will benefit those stockholders. At this point, so let us discuss the fundamental objectives or aim or goal of corporate governance. So first, improvement of shareholder value, and second, conscious consideration of the interest of other stakeholders. So first, improvement of shareholders value. So shareholders value can be improved by making a pre-commitment to build better relations with primary stakeholders. So these primary stakeholders includes the employees, customers, suppliers, and communities. So if you have better relations with these stakeholders, so it will lead to an increase in shareholders' wealth, since this would help the firms expand and of course develop intangibles which the firm could capitalize on and in turn become a source of their competitive advantage. So kung ilado ang company na maayo siya sa iyang mga employees, sa iyang communities, so it will build goodwill to that company. And then, i-refer po siya sa ubang tao, of course, it will increase the value or the shareholder value of that certain company. Good reputation is just one example to these intangibles, which could largely predict the future of the business. So imagine, nabay customer nga mokuha og kanang product from a corporation nga daghay reklamo from its customers. Di ba? Wala. Um, Better relations with employees engender employees' commitment. Good relations with customers and suppliers complete the full circle of strong alliances. So you will build alliances with suppliers, of course, if okay na yung relations, so possible nga tagaan pa kanyang discount. Second, fundamental objective of corporate governance is conscious consideration of the interests of other stakeholders. So when a company meets the objectives of increasing the shareholder value, so the first objective, it will have a greater internally generated resources in improving its commitment in meeting its environmental, community, and social obligations. So, for example, it can pay taxes well, reward, train and retain key staff so wala kayo'y manghawa, and enhance employee satisfaction. A key focus area is a company's human capital, which is the lead indicator of success. So based on a study, ang human capital gid ang pinaka-indicator for success sa uban organization. So these two are the fundamental objectives or aim of the corporate governance. So what does good governance promote? So sa may promote sa good governance? So we have three: transparency, accountability, and prudence. So transparency. Transparency is vital with respect to corporate governance due to the critical nature of reporting financial and non-financial information. The aim includes maintaining investor, consumer, and other stakeholders' confidence. So the lack of dedication to corporate governance policies, particularly those related to transparency, will drive home to the point that the company is unbalanced and the leadership is not incorporating it to the highest level of truthfulness. Failure in transparency issues could lead to many things. Scaring off investors is just one of them. Being singled out by the authority is another, which could mean the watchful eyes of the agencies which will be focused on the company and many other uncomfortable scenarios which no company wants to be in. So simply means when we say transparent or sa Bisaya pa klaro, dapat klaro sa mga stakeholders what really happened during the operation of the company. So they must disclose all informations, especially those relevant informations, to the stockholders to maintain their confidence. Second is accountability. Accountability is the recognition and assumption of responsibility for the decisions, actions, policies, administration, governance, and implementation of programs and plans of the corporation and people involved, including the obligation to report, explain, and be answerable for its resulting consequences. So when we say accountability, so it is acknowledging and taking charge for and being transparent about the impacts of the company's policies, decisions, actions, products, and its associated performance. And lastly, we have prudence. So prudence is defined within the Code of Corporate Governance as care, caution, and good judgment as well as wisdom in looking ahead. It is the management committee which is in the corporate setting, the board of director, who will be the body responsible in safeguarding the interest of the organization through good planning and management of finances and other resources of the organizations. So when we say prudence, the board together with the management should exercise uh, due care, and they must be cautious and exercise good judgment. So dapat before taking into action, there must be a planning, there must be a plan or dapat ilang giplano to before gitake ang action. Para if in case man gani, there will be a mistake na mahitabo, at least ma-minimize lang nila. Because they exercised, I mean, they have planned it carefully. So for the last slide, so last slide na lang, no? So what will be the benefits if corporation adopts or practice good governance? So these are just some of the benefits. Reduced vulnerability, marketability, credibility, and valuation. So when we say reduced vulnerability. So, adopting good corporate governance practices leads to an improved system of internal control. So, since they established internal controls, so it will lead to greater accountability. So, controls will protect corporate resources, and eventually, it will result to better profit margins. Good corporate governance practices will also pave the way for probable future development, diversifications, including the capability to attract investors, both sourced nationally and even abroad. Good corporate governance will also reduce the cost of loans or credits for corporations, since companies with good corporate governance can be considered low-risk companies in the eyes of the debt investors. Second is marketability. So, embracing the principles of good corporate governance can also play a role in enhancing the corporate value of companies. So, this leads to easy access to capital in financial markets, which helps the company survive in an even more competitive environment. Good corporate governance will also make the company more attractive in open market. So this attribute will be beneficial and will place the company at the finer end of the bargaining in times when strategic alliances are needed. Examples of these strategic alliances are mergers, acquisitions, corporate absorptions and buyouts, partnerships, joint ventures, and other risk mitigating initiatives. So if you notice, kanang mga companies nga nag-practice of good corporate governance, murag daghay mag-ilog nga company nga mo-acquire sa ilaha. So, sa mga mga companies like si YouTube, gi-acquire na ni Google. Si Mang Inasal, gi-acquire na ni Jollibee. The third benefit of good governance is credibility. So, there are a good number of benefits when an entity embraces good corporate governance. One of which is the company need not spend more resources in compliance with the regulatory and other financial institutions' requirements necessary, since all these things are already integrated in the company's operating approach. Companies that are known for good governance practices need not sell themselves that hard for investors to fuse in their investments, either equity or debt investors. So in the context of investment, everything could rise and fall in credibility and reputation. So when a company is credible, investors' trust comes next. Where investors' trust is in, so money follows. So when there is money, there is flexibility. So it is in having that flexibility in a competitive world that could spell out the difference between failure and success. So when we say credible, so investors can trust their investment to that company. So no need na sa company nga sell out ang ilang selves para mo-invest ang mga investors, because the investors themselves, they know that based on siguro mga reviews from other investors na that company is credible or practicing good governance. And the last benefit we have is valuations. So investors are willing to pay a higher price or premium for the shares of well-governed company over one considered poorly governed, given all financial figures comparably equal. So kung ako investor, so bisan pa og mahal ang iyang shares ana company, basta kabalo lang ko nga that company is well governed or they practice good governance. So of course mo invest jud ko na ang company. So bisan pa og nay mas barato dira pero kabalo man ko nga daghay mga fraud dira or dili maayo na pagka-govern nga company. So dili po ko invest ana. So that's the benefit of good governance. So again, reduced vulnerability. Second, marketability. Third, credibility. And lastly, valuations. So that's it for this video. So if you have any questions, so do not hesitate to post it in the forum section, or you can chat or comment in our GC or FB group. So thank you.